Both the generals and Li stood silently in front of each other. Li was scared for his life and wondered if the generals would kill him for letting Moshe steal the book. Meanwhile, General Hai and Shura were also worried about whether it was all part of the master's plan. Li couldn't bear the thoughts anymore, so he decided to apologize and bowed down his head. However, before he could say anything, he heard the voice of the dragon girl and Nun Nun. They had arrived in the underworld with the Book of Life and Death. Li started tearing up as he saw the book and asked them what happened. They explained that they were waiting for him at the door of the underworld when they saw his bottle and the book on the ground. Li cried some tears of happiness as he tightly held the book and told them that the underworld wasn't a place for kids like them. They hugged them and told them not to try something like this the next time. Bro was acting like they didn't save his life. The generals were also relieved as they saw the book, since they were now convinced that it was all part of the expert's plan. However, the book stated that Moshe had an endless lifespan, so they didn't know how they were supposed to fight against her now. They didn't know that Moshe was trapped endlessly inside Li's bottle, so she did have an infinite lifespan, but couldn't do anything. Li gave the book back to the generals and asked them if there was any damage to the book. As General Hai turned the pages of the book, Li realized that they were empty. General Hai pulled up a search bar and showed him a list of people who were going to die within the next hour. Li wondered why the search bar looked exactly like a search engine. General Hai explained that the Book of Life and Death controlled the lifespan of all individuals, which made it the most valuable treasure in the world. It could also be used to search for details about specific individuals. Nun Nun innocently asked the general if he could search for her mother and show her lifespan. It turned out that Nun Nun's mother had a lifespan of 72 years, and she was going to die of natural causes. Nun Nun wondered why her mom would only live for 72 years, since she had been giving her a lot of elixirs. The general told her that her mom would perish naturally thanks to the elixirs. Otherwise, she would have died of some disease. She had already changed her life by making her immune to diseases, but she couldn't increase her lifespan. Nun Nun made the most innocent face and asked if there was a way for her to increase her mother's lifespan. The general didn't know what to say, but when he saw Li making an innocent face too, he surrendered and decided to increase her lifespan by about 30 years. Li and Nun Nun started celebrating while the general cried, since he knew he was going to be punished by the gods for messing with the book. Suddenly, the book opened up the record of a demon. The demon's name was Tu Jia, and the book said that he would die at 56 years old while fighting in the war. The demon was in the vanguard, fighting against the human army. He had been invading mortal cities and killing countless people. Li wasn't happy to see that he had another 30 years left to live, since he was only 26 at the time. Li looked at the record and said that countless human soldiers would die at his hands as long as he lived. Nun Nun and the dragon girl demanded that the man be killed immediately. Li also looked at the general and told him to shorten the lifespan of the demon by 30 years. My man is slowly turning into Kira. After deducting 30 years from the demon's life, he suddenly collapsed on the battlefield and died of a heart attack. Li told them that it was fine, and the demon general was lucky to live till 26. Li then looked at the general with sparkling eyes and asked him if he could look at his own record. The general nervously searched for Li's name. However, no record showed up. Li told them that it was a bit weird. However, General Hai thought that it was completely normal for his name not to show up, since he was such a big shot. Shura explained to him that someone with too many variables didn't have their name in the Book of Life and Death. Since he had a meritorious flesh body, his name was removed from the book. Li was satisfied with this explanation and asked them if he could live forever if he gave it his best. The generals cheered him up and told him that he absolutely could. Li and the girls started celebrating again, while the generals thought to themselves that the expert loved to act. Back in the immortal world, Princess Yang asked Da Yi if she was serious about wanting to revive the Heavenly Palace. Da Yi told her that it was the expert's wish, and she would do anything that the expert wanted. Huo teased her and said that there were other ways in which she could be helpful to the expert. However, since he had instructed her to help her, she would also help her in the plan. She then turned towards Princess Yang and asked her if the Heavenly Palace still existed. Princess Yang told her that the Heavenly Palace always existed, but it had been sealed off by ice. She asked her where it was sealed, and the princess ordered them both to look. She moved her hand, and they all got transported to the holy land of the ice field. She had been living there in seclusion ever since she left the Heavenly Palace. She revealed that she had been guarding the gate of the Heavenly Palace all this time in hopes that she would return to it someday. Huo noticed a massive icicle and asked if it was the seal of the Heavenly Palace. Princess Yang told her that she was right. She tried to break the seal with every technique she could think of, but she still failed. She even tried to fly for days, but she couldn't reach the end of the seal. Princess Yang touched the seal and told them that the Temple of Heaven existed beyond the extension of this icicle. Huo turned to Da Yi and told her that it seemed a bit troublesome. Da Yi ignored her and went straight for the icicle. She watched it up close and revealed that it was actually an array. She asked Huo if she remembered how Li wanted to teach her chess before she left. Huo asked her how it related to their current situation. Da Yi explained that the expert must have already known about this, so he stayed with her for half a month and taught her the Great Dao Array in chess. It was just a game in the expert's eyes. She looked back at them with a smile and told them that she could break the array. They could melt ice with fire. However, the array in front of them was an absorption array, so it didn't matter how much they tried to melt it, the array would always regenerate. In order to break the array, they needed to break its formation. Princess Yang decided that they would let her take care of the array. Da Yi told them that she was planning on using an opposite array to expel the divine qi. However, they needed 2 Taiyi golden immortals to provide the energy needed to maintain the array. Ling Zhu agreed to provide energy for the array. Huo asked her what her job was in all of this. Da Yi looked at her with a smile and assigned her to her job. As the 3 of them peacefully drank their tea, Huo used all of her energy to try to melt down the icicle. Da Yi told her to keep going, since it would take almost 10 to 15 days since the icicle started melting. It was the next chapter, and Huo was still trying to melt the array. Da Yi assured her that she would succeed soon. Huo turned towards her in a rage and asked her if she was making fun of her. Da Yi pointed towards the icicle and told her that it had broken down. Huo didn't have any time to react as the ice shards dropped on top of her head. She blamed Da Yi and said that she was trying to make fun of her. After the array broke, the 4 of them stared at a golden wave of light that was rotating in the sky. They still couldn't see the heavenly palace, so Da Yi asked the princess if they had failed. Princess Yang suddenly started walking towards the light and ordered both of them to follow her. The 3 of them held hands and walked into the light together. Meanwhile, Ling Zhu was left behind confused as she wondered where they were going. Princess Yang led them to the other side of the array, where the heavenly palace was located. However, it looked to be in a grim state. As they continued walking towards the southern gate of the palace, Ling Zhu called out to them, asking them where they were. Huo remembered that it was actually the heavenly palace, since she had seen this door before. Back in the days when she visited this palace, she wasn't allowed to go inside, since she didn't meet the qualifications. She remembered how beautiful it looked with numerous stars, and the moon circling around in the sky. However, the current state of the palace looked completely different. Huo suddenly noticed a statue and started running towards it. It was a statue of the Phoenix clan. She told them that the dragon, the Phoenix, and the Qilin clans were the #1 divine beasts for the creation of this world. She was happy that the heavenly palace had carved her Phoenix clan statue to keep the place under control. She started looking around at different things in the palace and thought about taking something back for the master. However, Da Yi saw her and stood behind her with murderous intent. Da Yi then went back to Princess Yang and told her that there weren't any people in the heavenly palace. Princess Yang looked down and told her that she wanted to visit the 7 Goddess Pavilion to search for her sisters. Da Yi asked her what the 7 Goddess Pavilion was. Princess Yang revealed that there were 33 heavenly palaces and 72 treasure halls. The 7 Goddess Pavilion was one of them. As they were talking, Huo saw something at a distance and went to check. There seemed to be 2 huge statues in front of her. She called out to Da Yi and tried showing her the statues. However, in reality, they were Daluo golden immortals. One of them tried to attack Huo, but she dodged it at the last second. The immortal barely missed and looked at her with a furious expression. Princess Yang couldn't believe that there were still Daluo golden immortals in the heavenly palace. She furiously asked them who they were. The immortals stood tall and made them look like ants. They claimed to be the guards of the heavenly palace and asked them why they were there. Princess Yang didn't believe them and said that they were lying, since she hadn't seen them before. This made the immortals mad, and they told her that she must have been one of the fugitives that escaped from the heavenly palace. They told them that they were trespassing and prepared to attack. Princess Yang quickly told Huo and Da Yi to defend themselves. The 2 of them combined their strengths and launched a fire attack on the Daluo golden immortals. The immortal quickly blocked the attack and threw them all with his terrifying strength. He stood above them and said that the phoenix and 9-tailed fox were just remnants. Meanwhile, Ling Zhu had started crying on the other side of the icicle. Imagine leaving the strongest immortal behind. She was alone and felt cold, so she wondered what she could do. Her eyes fell on the teapot, and she immediately sat down to drink some tea. However, as she looked at the golden light, she noticed that it looked a bit familiar. Ling Zhu knew that something was not right. On the other side, the Immortals were not holding back against the princess and the other two girls. One of them tried attacking Da Yi with his massive mace, but Princess Yang protected her by stopping the attack using her binding spell. Even though she had stopped the attack, she couldn't hold it for much longer. The Du Lao Golden Immortals had an infinite lifespan, so they were neither dead nor alive. Hua suggested that they retreat, since they were no match for the Immortals in their current state. Princess Yang released her technique and ordered them both to retreat and come back with a plan. However, the Du Lao Immortals weren't going to let them leave this easily. They blocked their escape path, so they couldn't leave. Without a warning, one of them hit the princess directly and sent her flying through all the buildings. Da Yi and Huo looked back at the princess to make sure that she was okay. They had failed to realize that the Immortals were still standing in front of them. One of them asked if they really had the time to worry about others, and tried to squish them below his feet. Before he could kill them, a giant hand appeared from the ground and blocked his attack. It was Ling Zhu, and she had finally arrived to help them. She looked back at them with a smile and told them that she had been looking for them. Princess Yang also got up and told them that they needed to fight the Du Lao Immortals together. Now that Ling Zhu was also on their team, they all combined their strengths to launch a powerful attack. Pocket Li and the baby Phoenix were also motivating them. Ling Zhu rooted the Immortals so they couldn't move. However, when they finally released the powerful flame attack, the Immortals started laughing. He thanked the attack like it was nothing and stood there without a mark. Da Yi and the others were completely shocked. As the smoke cleared, they finally saw the true form of the Du Lao Golden Immortal. He told them that they had surpassed the 5 decays of mankind, and now they had the same lifespan as heaven and earth. There was nothing they could do to kill them. Da Yi knew that they couldn't run from the Immortals. As all hope seemed to be lost, Pocket Li screamed out and told the Du Lao Golden Immortals that they couldn't bully Da Yi. The bright golden light blinded the Immortals, and when they were finally able to see, they realized that everyone was already gone. The Immortals knew that the princess and her friends had gone to the mortal world, so they decided to leave them alone since they didn't get paid enough to travel that far. However, they were still impressed with the defense power of Pocket Li and wondered who the fugitives were. After standing in silence for a few seconds, they decided to forget the matter, since the fate of the world had already been decided. Princess Yang and her friends successfully made it outside the Heavenly Palace, thanks to Pocket Li. She looked up and deduced that the Du Lao Golden Immortals couldn't go outside, since they didn't chase them. Ling Zhu asked her how such powerful immortals got restrained. Princess Yang told her that the person who restrained them must be terrifying. As the two of them were talking, Hua noticed Da Yi sitting alone at a distance. She was crying while holding her Pocket Li. The statue had blocked the attack of the Du Lao Golden Immortals and was now destroyed. Da Yi thought that it was all her fault and called herself useless. Huo and Princess Yang talked to each other about how surprising it was to see 2 Du Lao Golden Immortals in the Heavenly Palace. There weren't many people who could reach that level. Da Yi suddenly spoke out and told them that it was all a game of chess. She explained that Li was concerned about the game theory, so they needed to be good pieces. They had to face everyone who stood against him. Princess Yang smiled and told them that it was a good thing that they had the expert to lean on. Otherwise, they would have died a long time ago. Now it was time for them to observe the expert's game. Meanwhile, Li was on top of a volcano collecting brimstone. Since he could fly now, it was easier for him to find places like these. He wanted to make a gift for Nun Nun and Da Yi. Nun Nun got a bit sad and told him that they didn't know when Da Yi was coming back. Li stared at the mountains in the distance and told her that he didn't know what she was doing right now. As Li and the 2 kids came back home, they were met by Da Yi and Huo. Li ignored Huo and rushed towards Da Yi to hug her. He showed her the golden flower, which allowed him to have a meritorious flesh body. Da Yi was impressed and thought that Li was not going to act like a mortal anymore. Li smiled and told her that he was still a mortal, but he was just a bit different. He then asked her how her education was going. Da Yi didn't respond and stared at the ground silently. Suddenly, Nun Nun and the dragon girl came to hug her. They told her that Li had a treasure to show her. Li got a bit nervous as Da Yi looked at him, so he ran to show her the gift. Da Yi sat down with the 2 girls and asked them what the script was for the day. Nun Nun explained to her how they went on several amazing adventures and how they saw the riot in the underworld, while also defeating the demon lord Moshe. Huo got excited upon hearing this, but Da Yi didn't feel the same. She thought to herself that Li was too strong. On the other hand, she couldn't even do simple tasks, so she feared that he might leave her. Suddenly, they all heard a loud noise in the sky. As Dai Yi looked back, she saw beautiful fireworks which lit up the entire night sky. Li held her hand and reminded her how they watched the fireworks when they met for the first time. Dai Yi told him that it happened about 200 chapters ago. Li looked at her and said that he knew she liked fireworks, so he wanted to show her the fireworks that he used to see in his own world. Dai Yi felt ashamed as she realized that Li treated her so kindly, but she was still used less. Li knew that something was wrong, so he asked her if it had something to do with her learning. He assured her that she could learn from him forever. He also told her that she needed to stop making jokes about being his pet, since she was the girl that he liked. He really unleashed all of his riz in a single chapter. Dai Yi held his arm and told him that she would always listen to him. Meanwhile, Huo got jealous as she saw them acting so happy. In the Heavenly Palace, the two Dulao Golden Immortals were enjoying the fireworks while having a cup of tea. They didn't know who would set off the fireworks, but they still enjoyed the show. Suddenly, the fireworks turned into a rocket and started heading towards them. The Immortals had no time to react as the rocket blasted them out of existence. These guys spent thousands of years to reach this stage and lost to some volcanic fireworks. As Li kissed Dai Yi in the mortal world, the fireworks painted the background with the faces of the two Immortals, who had just died. As Princess Yang and the old man stood outside the Icefield Palace, the ground beneath them started shaking. They ran outside to see what was going on and noticed the fireworks in the sky. Princess Yang smiled as she realized that the two Dulao Golden Immortals were dead. There was only one person who could kill them in such an elegant and artistic manner, and it was Li. With the death of the two Dulao Golden Immortals, the door to the Heavenly Palace was now opened. You and the Dragon King could see the light of the Heavenly Palace from his palace in the deep sea. All the Immortals and coast servants also witnessed this event and realized that it was truly the start of a new generation. Dai Yi smiled as she realized that it had all happened according to her master's plan. The next day, Sect Master Pei, Chief Gu, and Immortal Gu all stood in front of Li's door carrying a lamb. Chief Gu asked his ancestor if the expert was going to like their gift. Immortal Pei was worried that the expert might not need them anymore since his goal of reviving the Heavenly Palace had been accomplished. Immortal Gu tried to cheer them up and told them that they should just hope that their gift would continue to remind the master about them. The three of them congratulated Li on the good news as soon as he opened the door. Li was shocked upon hearing this, since he thought that they were talking about his relationship with Dai Yi. They told him that the whole world knew about it at this point, which made Li even more worried. He thought that it must be because Dai Yi was the most beautiful girl in the world, and everyone was jealous of him. As he invited them in, they showed him the goat that they had brought for him as a gift. I'm no expert in goats, but I'm pretty sure that's a sheep. They explained to him how they went around asking the Immortals about what the best meat was, and they all led them to this goat. Li analyzed the sheep and told them that it would be a shame to just kill and eat it, since it was so rare, so he ordered Bai to fetch a razor and trim its wool. Bai put the sheep to sleep using his special move and began preparing to trim its wool. Dai Yi and Huo had woken up by now. Li invited them to try some steamboats. All of them sat around a hot pot that resembled yin and yang. The Immortals were losing their minds over this hot pot's design. They thought that Li was too savage. As Immortal, Pei started eating. He commended the eating style and said that it was reasonable to boil the dishes one wanted to eat. Immortal Gu agreed with him and said that it allowed everyone to eat from the same pot, which strengthened their relationship. Li suddenly asked Chief Gu if he liked to eat leeks. He ordered Bai to bring them more leeks and told them all to feel at home. He explained that leeks grew pretty fast after you harvested one, so there was always another one to harvest. The Immortals began wondering if there was some hidden message in the expert's words. They wondered if he was regarding them as a leek. As they all stared at him attentively, he asked them if they had already noticed his meritorious flesh body. The Immortals started stuttering as they heard this word. Their jaws fell to the ground as they grasped what Li had just told them. Li showed them the golden flower and said that he would be their friend from now on. The Immortals started spitting blood as they heard that the expert wanted to be their friend. They couldn't think that they were qualified enough for that. They congratulated him on his achievement and wondered why he was showing them his strength all of a sudden. Li told them that his meritorious flesh body didn't matter much since they would get along the same way they did before. The Immortals thought that the expert was trying to tell them that he still had more use for them. Dai Yi accompanied the Immortals to the door as they left. As she was walking back, Chief Gu stopped her and said that the expert had mentioned trimming wool and harvesting leeks. He thought that the expert was referring to the black market in the immortal world. Dai asked him what he meant, and he told her that the gourd seeds gifted by Zero and the Game Boy were both obtained from the black shop. He told her that the expert must have felt that the items were mediocre, so he wanted them to continue swapping more treasures. Dai still seemed a bit confused, so Immortal Gu explained that the process of harvesting leeks was the same as swapping treasures. Dai agreed with their reasoning and allowed them to continue swapping for treasures. Chief Gu stopped her again and told her that their last 2 deals with the shopkeeper didn't go too well, so the black shop had hired 10 more bodyguards from the Golden Immortal Realm to protect them. It would be difficult to swap if they went alone. Dai thought to herself that they weren't even dealing anymore. They were just robbing the shop, so it was logical for him to hire bodyguards. She told them that since it was important, she was willing to help them during the swapping deal. Meanwhile, the fire sparrow was cleaning dishes inside the house. She thought to herself how she belonged to the mighty Phoenix clan, but had to do chores and lay eggs for the master. However, the dragon girl was also doing chores alongside her, so it made her feel less bad. Lee suddenly entered the room and took the dragon girl away. The fire sparrow was left alone to do all the chores. Lee went to the market with Dai and the dragon girl. A man wearing a green hat recognized him and stopped. He informed him that everyone in the city was rushing to the center and also invited him to have a look. Lee asked him what was happening. The man told him that many great literary talents and well-known virtuous people had recently received dreams from the underworld. The dreams instructed them to create a temple of the town god and elect an individual as the town god. King Luo personally supervised the construction of the temple. Lee realized that it was exactly the suggestion that he had given to the ghost servants. He initially wanted to increase his lifespan and live together with Dai. In order to do that, he had to maintain a good relationship with the underworld so he could get a job. He thought to himself that the underworld might select him as the town god of the fallen divine town. The man grabbed Lee by his hand and took him to the town center, where King Luo and Shiyu were already waiting for him. The 2 of them rushed through the crowd, while the man shouted that Lee was the most suitable candidate for the job. Lee was sure that he was going to be the new town god. To his surprise, the actual task was to write an inscription for the temple. King Luo handed him the pen and told him that he was the most suited individual for this task in terms of virtue and talent. Lee stared at the pen with a disappointed expression, since he was expecting a lot more. Meanwhile, King Luo thought that the position of town god was too small for Lee, so he didn't bother asking him. While holding the pen, Lee asked him if he had decided on the candidate for the town god. King Luo revealed that according to the dream, the candidate was supposed to be born this afternoon. However, it was time, but there was still no sign of the town going. Lee told him that he would wait until the town god was decided before writing the inscription. Some more time had passed, and there still was no news about the town god. As the crowd started getting more impatient, King Luo wondered what was going on. Lee thought to himself if something had gone wrong with the selected town god. In the underworld, a ghost servant hurriedly opened the door and informed Grandma that the town god temples had been constructed in different places in the mortal world. However, they still couldn't select a town god. Meng looked back at the ghost servant and asked him if they had failed. They had already expected this problem to arise, since the underworld had changed. In the former underworld, they only needed to give the person the position and responsibilities to become the town god. However, now, the Heavenly Tao controlled most of the responsibilities of the underworld. This also included the position of town god. They didn't have the ability to select a town god on their own. The ghost servant asked her if it was possible that the expert failed to see this issue. Meng told him not to talk ill of the expert. They still needed to select a town god, and if they couldn't, they needed to send in a ghost servant. The problem was that they didn't have enough ghost servants in the underworld. Grandma Meng stared at the sky and told him that they should take one step at a time. Back in the mortal world, the crowd was getting more suspicious. They wondered if the instructions from the underworld were just a dream. One of them even said that the underworld didn't even exist. Before things got worse, Lee called out to the crowd and told them that there must be a delay due to some special circumstances in the underworld. All good things take time, so they need to be patient. He decided to start writing the inscription so that when the town god was selected, they could use the inscription right away. Dai smiled as she saw how King Lee was to the mortals. King Luo prepared the ink for Lee to write the inscription. Lee began to wonder what he was going to write on the inscription. He was a bit sad about not being the town god, but he knew how important the town god temple was since it bridged the gap between the underworld and the moral world. As soon as he started using the brush, a huge golden light shone across the sky. Even ghost servants in the underworld could see that light. As Grandma Meng looked up, she saw the following words in the sky. "We know when the picture is drawn based on the lakes and mountains within 800 miles. Hundreds of thousands of fireworks will come back here." The words were literally displayed in the sky in a fireworks show. A huge explosion ended the show, and the underworlds started changing. As Meng looked back, she saw water flowing in the river of Acheron. Moreover, the red spider lily had also started blooming. It seemed like the underworld was coming back to life. The real destination of lost souls had been restored. Since the Acheron had dried out, the souls had to be transferred to the Styx River. Quinny Meng told the servant that it felt like everything was back to normal. He was still confused and asked her what was happening. She told him that the underworld's fate was back. The servant questioned if the expert was behind all this. Meng told him that the merits they received came from the town god temple. The heavenly Tao had recognized the inscription written by the expert. As the two of them were talking, Queen Meng heard someone calling out her name. When she looked back, she saw Minotaur and Ma Mian, who had vanished a long time ago. Li was still writing the inscription. After finishing, he asked the crowd if it was good. Everyone praised him for the inscription and called him a genius. Li asked the man wearing the green hat if he actually liked the words. The man told him that he didn't understand what was written, but he could feel that it was artistic. Yeah, people say the same about modern art. King Lu immediately snatched it from the man's hand and told him that he was going to hang the words at the door of the temple. Everyone in the crowd wanted to see the inscription, so they all went wild. Li told Da Yi that it was a bit sad, that the town gods still hadn't been selected, so they didn't know how it was. The dragon girl asked him if she could be the town god, but Li rejected it, saying that she was too young. He explained to her how it was a serious matter, and that the saint who became a town god was responsible for the protection of the people. As he told her all these things, the roots of the huge trees started shining. The dragon girl stopped and with the most innocent-looking face asked her if they could go back to her home via the spiritual Sun Lake. Li thought that she was missing her home, so he agreed. The dragon girl told him that he could easily avoid water using the water-avoiding beads. Li looked at Da Yi and asked her if they could visit the dragon girl's home. Da Yi immediately agreed with a smile on her face. In the East Sea Dragon Palace, a man dodged through all the guards and made his way to the Dragon King. This man was the Dragon King of the West, and he wanted to meet Chung, who was the Eastern Dragon King. The Western Dragon King explained that the Dragon King of the South Sea had conspired with the devil and betrayed his clan. "I think I need a compass to figure this out." The Western Dragon King screamed at Chung and asked him if he was still trying to avoid the matter. Chung put his hand on his shoulder and asked him what the problem was. The Dragon King explained that all of his dragons had been wiped out in the catastrophe. The Dragon King of the South used this opportunity to conspire with the devil and poisoned him. He only had the East Sea to ask for help, and that's why he came here. Chung got worried upon hearing this and asked him if he had been poisoned. The Dragon King held Chung's hand and explained that he was infected by a dragon-devouring poison, which could even spread by touching the infected person. Chung looked at his hand and noticed that he now had a death timer on top of his head. He screamed at the other Dragon King, asking him why he couldn't tell him all this before. The Dragon King told him that it was a good thing, since he couldn't stay out of this matter now. He grabbed a cup of tea and suggested that they think of a solution. Chung sighed and told him that they would gather their troops and head to the South Sea together. They could force the Southern King to hand over the antidote. The Dragon King got excited upon hearing this and told him that they should have started working together sooner for the future of their dragon clan. Suddenly, a guard walked inside and reported that the expert was going to visit the palace soon. The Dragon King laughed and told the guard to send the expert away, since he and Chung were dealing with other important matters. Chung called him Lil Bro and said that he was canceling their deal, since he had an important guest visiting. He advised him to fight alone for a bit longer. Chung then ordered all the guards to start cleaning the palace. He put on his chef clothes and started preparing appetizers for the expert. Meanwhile, the Western Dragon King stared at him in complete disbelief. The guards told him to move, since they were busy setting up signs. They even changed the name of the palace from the East Sea Dragon Palace to the East Sea Carp Palace. The Western Dragon King saw this and screamed at them, asking if they had all gone insane. After preparing the food, Chung noticed that the Dragon King was still sleeping in a corner of his palace. He had given up all hope, since one of the Dragon Kings had betrayed him, while the other had gone insane. Chung woke up Dragon King Yoon and told him to get up. Yoon started tearing up and said that he didn't meet his advice since he was too disappointed. Chung told him that he wasn't giving him any advice. He was simply telling him to move, since it would seem inappropriate in front of the expert. Yoon quickly moved behind a pot. One of the guards threw a rug on his face, so the expert couldn't see him. Yoon felt shattered by all this humiliation. At the same time, the dragon girl led Lee and Da Yi to their underwater palace. Lee and Da Yi were inside a huge air bubble, so they could breathe. Lee was mesmerized when he saw the huge palace. An army of servants welcomed him at the entrance. Lee thought that they looked more like gangsters. One of the servants opened the gate for them and told them that the Dragon King was awaiting their arrival. Chung warmly welcomed all of them and invited them over for dinner. Lee couldn't help but be impressed by how luxurious the house looked. However, he noticed that the Dragon King had horns on his head. Chung had told him that he was a carp spirit. He immediately pulled out his horns and told him that they were just clips. Lee laughed as he thought to himself that he was just a carp who was trying to act like a dragon. The Dragon King told him that he couldn't prepare anything fancy, since he had little time. Lee saw the fish in front of him and felt a bit awkward, since he was also surrounded by fish guards. The Dragon King asked him why he wasn't eating. Before Lee could say something, the Dragon King said that the food must have been too boring for him. He clapped, and in a few seconds, a mermaid appeared along with a musical instrument. This made Lee even more awkward, as he didn't know what to do. The Dragon King saw that Lee still wasn't eating, so he clapped again and the mermaid got even closer to him. The Dragon King told him that he was their guest, so he could tell him if he was bothered by anything. Lee told him that everything was brilliant, but there was one thing that was bothering him. He pointed at the door, through which Yoon was peeking like a hungry ghoul. Chung laughed and told Lee that the man was just a distant relative, and he didn't need to worry about him. Lee asked him if he was sure, since the man appeared to be vomiting blood. Moreover, he also had a death timer on top of his head, which made Lee worried. Bro is literally surviving on 1 HP. Chung told him that the man was suffering from a deadly poison. He urged Lee not to worry about him and continue his meal. Lee couldn't possibly continue eating after hearing that, so he told the Dragon King that he knew some medical skills and may even be able to help his relative. Lee took a deep breath and started analyzing Yoon's pulse. Yoon didn't know who Lee was, so he asked the Dragon King about what was going on. The Dragon King told him to keep quiet. Yoon started shouting and told him that his body had been poisoned and it wasn't going to stop until he was dead. He called Lee a fool and said that there was no way he could understand his disease. He told the Dragon King that it would have been better if he sent someone with him to get the antidote. The Dragon King hit him with a karate chop and buried him underground. Lee continued feeling his pulse with his eyes closer. After a few moments, he opened his eyes. He told them that the situation looked way beyond what medicine could handle, and it was actually troublesome. Yoon started shouting again and told him that he already knew that a mortal couldn't cure him. As always, Lee had an alternative solution. He transformed into Doraemon and pulled out an ultrasound machine out of his pocket. After setting up the equipment, Lee started monitoring the poison inside Yoon's body. The poison appeared to be feeding on flesh and blood. It was eating away the area between the heart meridian and the energy center. Yoon couldn't believe that he was actually seeing inside his own body and wondered if the footage was fake. Da Yi explained that the blood and mana between the heart meridian and the energy center tasted the best, so the poison worms preferred to feed on that area. Lee started thinking and told them that if the poison worms fed on the most delicious part of the body, they could bait them into going to a less important part of the body and cut it out. Lee explained that if they made an area that was tastier than the heart meridian and the energy center, they could lure the worms to that area. Once the worms started moving to the new area, they could cut it out and eliminate the poison. Yoon looked at others thinking that it was a bad idea, but everyone else agreed with Lee and told him that it was a good idea. The Dragon Girl said that if someone else had suggested this method, they might have thought that it was stupid, but since it was Lee, they couldn't reject it. Da Yi also started commending Lee's cooking skills. The Dragon Girl innocently told Yoon to hurry up and choose a body part. Before Yoon could say anything, the Dragon King suggested the tail, since it was delicious. Yoon objected because they had to cut off that part in the end, and he didn't want to lose his tail. He finally decided on his arm and said that he could grow it back in 1,000 years. My man turned into Goku and placed his hand on the grill. Lee tried motivating him and told him that Guan Yu scraped his bones to cure poison in ancient times, and now he was grilling his own hand. Lee started sprinkling some salt on the hand. He told Yoon to turn his arm quickly and evenly, while making sure that the meat was grilled evenly. It's like ordering the dish to cook itself. Lee told him that heat had a huge impact on the taste of the meat. The Dragon King motivated Yoon and told him to hold on. Yoon screamed at the top of his lungs as he steadily held his hand on the grill. After a few more minutes, the Dragon King smelled his arm and announced that it was cooked. The Dragon Girl got a bit carried away and tried taking a bite out of Yoon's hand. The Dragon King held her back, but it looked like he was drooling to have a taste himself. Even Yoon was drooling since his own hand smelled so good. Suddenly, the poison worms moved out of his heart and into his arm. Yoon quickly pulled his arm off the grill, and Da Yi slashed it with a knife. His hand got completely cut off, and the poison worms fell to the ground. Da Yi stood in front of Lee trying to protect him from the worms. Lee looked at her, and she told him to be careful of the splashing oil. The worms seemed too happy after eating Yoon's arm. It was so tasty that they transcended and vanished from the world. Yoon looked at his arm and realized that the dragon-devouring poison was gone. He looked at Lee and wondered what kind of existence he was. His mind started spinning, and he sat alone in a corner trying to contemplate life. The Dragon King invited Lee to eat again, but he simply smiled and started walking backwards. He kept smiling until he was out of the door and ran away. After he left, the Dragon King started tearing up. He thought to himself that Lee must have known about their difficulties and came here to help. He said that there were many big shots, but Lee was different from all of them, since he saw them as people too. He wiped his tears and said that they needed to devote their bodies and minds to him. Yoon calmly put his hand on his shoulder and screamed at him, asking who the expert really was. The snow in the ice-field palace had almost melted, and the place looked entirely different now. With the ice melting, the palace had also vanished. In a single day, the grass had grown and the smell of flowers filled the air. Sing, he told the princess, that it was all happening because of the expert. She looked at the sky and said that his plan had changed the general trend of the world. Since both of the Dulao golden immortals had died, she could now visit the heavenly palace again. As she flew into the sky, Singhi warned her since it was too dangerous. Princess Yang ignored his warnings and stood in front of the palace's southern gate. She went inside the gate and reached the seven goddess palace. She wondered if her sisters were still alive. As she slowly opened the door, her eyes were left wide open, and she could see all of her sisters in front of her. However, it was nothing but a short moment of happiness as she realized that her sisters had all turned into statues by now. They had been standing in the same position for thousands of years now. Not only them, but everyone else in the palace had also turned into a statue. Stingy looked at the sky and wondered what was going on in the heavenly palace. He could see the dark clouds as they covered the entire palace in the sky. He knew that something big was about to happen. Meanwhile, the shopkeeper was having a hard time in the black shop. He was still mad about losing two of his treasures to the Immortals. One of his assistants notified him of a guest that was visiting the shop. He asked the assistant if the guest was easy to deal with. The assistant let out an evil smile and told him that their combat power was less than 5, so they were an easy target. The guest was actually Da Yi's sister. She wore a hoodie to conceal her identity and tried acting confused as her sister had instructed her. The shopkeeper crept up on the fox and asked her if she wanted to make an exchange. He asked her why she wasn't talking, despite being a 9-tailed fox. The fox didn't say anything, and simply pushed a milk bottle and spiritual root in front of him. The shopkeeper realized that it was a top-grade spiritual root and the milk of the 5-colored divine ox. He told her that he didn't expect her to be carrying such treasures, and asked what she wanted in return. The fox pointed at the shelf which had treasures from ancient times, and told him that she wanted a DG Vice. At this point, I wouldn't be surprised if he was also selling meth in his shop. The fox quietly made her way out of the shop after exchanging the treasure. The assistant asked the shopkeeper if he was just going to let her get away with such a valuable treasure. The shopkeeper told him that they had messed up twice already, and he knew that there was someone behind all of it. The treasures he received from the fox looked like bait, and he was sure that they were related to the previous incidents. He told the assistant that he wasn't going to make the same mistake again. He got up from his chair and revealed that he would deal with the person himself. As the fox made it outside, she was stopped by the shopkeeper, who asked her about the items. He threatened to hurt her if she didn't tell him everything. Since the fox already knew this part of the script, she remained calm, and a bunch of cultivators appeared behind the shopkeeper. As the shopkeeper looked back, he saw Zero, Princess Yan, Immortal Gu, and Sect Master Pei. They told him to hand over all of his treasures to them if he didn't want to get hurt. The shopkeeper had already expected this much, so he started laughing. Suddenly, 3 of his men appeared behind the cultivators and told him that he was right about the trap. They were all golden immortals, and it seemed like they had the upper hand. As the shopkeeper announced that he was going to capture all of them, he heard someone asking him, if he was really going to capture them without the permission of their sword. The shopkeeper looked back in shock and saw 4 more immortals standing behind him. They revealed that they had already anticipated his plan. All of the other immortals lost their minds upon seeing some tiny golden immortals among them. The sword immortal told them that they were surrounded and ordered them to hand over all of their treasures. The shopkeeper fell down to the ground in tears and begged them not to do it. Dai told him that he was running a black shop and asked him what more treasures he had. After beating them up, they finally gave away all the treasures they had. The shopkeeper told them that it was everything he had acquired in his life in the immortal world. Dai asked him where he got all those items, and he told her that he got them from exchanging other treasures. He told them that if they had that special type of leek, he could exchange it for some spiritual relics. One of the golden immortals explained that most immortals were pure-hearted and ascetic. The leek was very beneficial for them. Dai asked Pei if he understood what they were talking about. He explained to them that the guy was right. Most of the immortals lived too long and were pure-hearted and ascetic. Most of the male ones deliberately acted like the sage types, so the leeks planted by the expert might help them find their faith back. The sword immortal wondered what faith he was talking about. Yeah, we are all wondering the same. Dai told him that she didn't understand what faith he was talking about, but they could surely do it. The shopkeeper aggressively bowed down and thanked her for the opportunity. The scene changed to the black shop, which was now filled with customers. They all had valuable treasures in their hands, which they wanted to exchange for the leeks. Even the high price of the exchange didn't stop the immortals from getting their hands on the leeks. Back in the mortal world, Lee stared at his leek plants and wondered who was harvesting them so frequently. Suddenly, Nun called him and told him that an orange gourd had fallen on the ground. Lee picked it up and told them that the immortal Siro gave it to him, so it was different from other seeds. Moreover, the golden color matched his golden meritorious flesh body. He called out to Dai and asked her what they should do with the golden gourd. However, when he looked back, he noticed that Dai wasn't in the house. Nun informed him that Dai had gone out with Huo early in the morning. Lee sighed and said that she had become restless after cultivating immortality. Since she was always going out and having fun, he suddenly remembered that he had a meritorious flesh body, so he could fly and visit more places. He put the golden gourd on the table and decided to take Dai out for a ride. As Kubo and Dai got back home, they saw Lee waiting for them in his golden Lambo. He took off his glasses in style and invited them inside for a ride. The scene changed to the border of the Xia dynasty. A shady-looking guy handed over his trade license to the border guard. The guard checked his documents and told him that he was allowed to pass. Suddenly, the guards noticed a car flying in the air. They shouted at the person to stop and show them his documents. However, the guards quickly realized that the person driving the car was Lee, so they let him through without checking. Lee thought he heard something as he went above the border, but he ignored it, thinking it wasn't that important. Dai told him that they had reached the palace of the Xia dynasty. After they landed, Lee noticed that the streets were much more crowded than they were before. He didn't expect the city to be so lively. Dai laughed and told him that it must have been due to the business plan he had shared with Prince Zhou. Lee suddenly noticed a bookstore with the posters of his own manhwa on the wall. Bro was about to get spoilers about his own life. Lee was a bit surprised to see a modern bookstore, since he wasn't expecting the dynasty to develop this much. Inside the store, the owner was reading a questionable book when he got interrupted by a kid. The kid asked him if he could borrow a book for his brother to read. The old man shouted at him and told him that he had to buy it if he wanted to read it at home. Otherwise, he could just read it at the store. The kid told him that his brother was sick, so he couldn't go out, but the old man wasn't ready to listen. Lee walked inside the bookstore and realized that it looked a lot like the bookstores back in his previous life. Lee asked the old man why he allowed the people to read the books for free, since it could affect his sales. The old man told him that only locals could afford to stay at the bookstore and read. People who came from outside, such as merchants and businessmen, had to buy the books so they could read them at home. The old man was confident that his books could convince people to pay for them. The dragon girl told him that she didn't trust him and asked how he was so confident. The old man started laughing and pulled out the book Journey to the West. He told them that it was written by Wu Chunlun, who was a great Taoist. Lee stood there listening to him awkwardly. The old man then pulled out 2 other books written by Lee and told him that these books were responsible for saving the Xia dynasty. They were the foundation of inheritance. He sold the 3 of them in a set for 99.8 taels of silver. He slammed the books on the counter and told him that he only received 5,000 copies of the books in one day, and all of them always sold out. He began gift wrapping the books for Lee and asked him if he wanted to buy them. Lee laughed and told him that he didn't need the books. The old man was in disbelief. He told him that he could only find the original copies of the book at his bookstore and asked him how he could even refuse to buy these books. Lee politely told him again that he didn't want the books. Yi knew that he had written all the books himself, so he wouldn't want the mass-produced versions. Lee noticed the kid putting his book back since he couldn't afford to buy it. He called out the shopkeeper and told him that he wanted to buy the set. The shopkeeper lit up and told him that he already knew he would buy the books since he couldn't find such good books anywhere else. As Lee was about to leave, another old man entered the store and reminded the old man that they had to fetch his grandson from school. As the two of them got ready, the old man noticed Lee passing by him. He quickly remembered that it was him. The owner asked him if he knew the man and told him that he had bought some books from him. The old man told him that the man was Wu Chang'an. Hearing this, the owner got mad at himself and punched the wall since he had accidentally taken money from their savior. Inside a tent, General Hu was mad at the strategists since they had come up with a crap strategy even after spending half a month. Prince Zhou told him to calm down and assured him that everything would fall into place soon. The strategists told him that there were too many variables that they needed to keep in mind, such as population, food, money, and even population flow. Collecting all that data in a short time was impossible. Moreover, the warfare at the front line had also turned passive. If the front line was too far, they couldn't properly focus on offense or defense. Prince Zhou laughed awkwardly and asked if none of them had a solution. As all of them were discussing the issue, a soldier arrived at the tent and informed the prince about the expert's arrival. Prince Zhou lit up and decided to welcome Lee by himself. He told the generals to wait for him at the tent and suggested they continue thinking about ideas for the problem. Lee stood on the palace balcony with Yi and Huo viewing the entire dynasty. He commented on how much it had changed compared to the last time he had visited. Yi told him that it was all due to his wisdom. Prince Zhou walked in and greeted all of them. He told Lee that he couldn't welcome him properly the last time since the dynasty was suffering from plague and other issues. However, now he wanted to give him a proper welcome. He first showed him the Glock that was kept inside a glass case. Someone gave him American citizenship. After that, he showed them a school. Some girls on the street saw the prince giving Lee a tour of the dynasty. Lee told the prince that he was happy for him, since the dynasty had prospered a lot. The prince looked down and told him that his efforts were useless, no matter how hard he tried. He thought to himself that Lee always found the solution to a problem that he encountered. However, he had entrusted him with a heavy responsibility, so he needed to make him proud. Lee noticed his expression and put his hand on his shoulder. He advised him to keep a balance between work and rest. Lee suggested that they play a game. As they all sat together, Lee pulled out a deck of cards and told him that they were poker cards. He was going to teach the prince how to play poker. General Hua was still waiting at the tent with his soldiers, but the prince was nowhere to be seen. He told them that something urgent must have happened with Master Lee, and that's why he got late. The soldiers decided to help Lee with the issue in hopes of gaining his favor. However, a woman stopped them at the gate and told them that the prince was busy playing a game with the expert. The soldiers could hear them playing poker. The game was so serious that even their artwork changed. Lee was the winner of the game, so he raised his hands in excitement. Prince Zhou apologized to Yi and told her that he was too dumb. Lee tried to make him feel better and told him that he recognized the numbers so well, even though it was his first time playing the game. When Prince Zhou heard his say number, something clicked in his mind. He immediately stood up and thought to himself that Lee was trying to teach him numbers. He could use them to count things like population, food, and much more. Lee noticed him looking at the cards with such concentration and asked if he was okay. Prince Zhou started crying as he realized that he was too slow to understand the lesson. Lee got even more worried as he saw him crying. Prince Zhou immediately went from crying to thanking him for his wisdom. He told him that the simplified version of numbers was beneficial for the Xia dynasty. Lee wondered if Prince Zhou had actually recognized the significance of the Arabic numerals through these cards. He let out a smile and decided to teach him more about numbers. He gave him a thumbs up and said that he was worthy of being taught. Lee stroked his chin and told him that he still had more to learn about numbers. The prince literally turned into a JoJo character because of the shock. He started looking at the cards for the secret of numbers. Lee raised his hand and ordered Yi to fetch him a pen. He sat down with the prince and began his lesson. The first thing he taught him was that 1 + 1 = 2. The prince stared at the numbers as if they were some ancient code and thought to himself that they contained great wisdom. He made up a weird hidden meaning of the numbers and the symbols and fried his brain. Lee nervously asked him if they could continue. He then went on to teach him first-grade maths. The next morning, Lee said goodbye to the prince and left the palace. Prince Joe stopped him and asked where he was going to stay for the day. Lee smiled and told him that he would find a suitable inn to stay. Prince Joe told him that he had prepared a gift for him. He took him to a large mansion in the center of the dynasty. They even had maids and servants included. Lee and Da Yi were greeted by beautiful maids as they entered the mansion. They felt a bit shy by this grand welcome. Prince Joe announced that he was gifting this house to Lee. Lee acted a bit shy, but accepted the gift anyway. He immediately went to bed to take a nap. Before leaving the room, Prince Joe told him that there was also some money in the warehouse, which he could use. Lee woke up surrounded by some female servants, who offered to help him bathe and change his clothes. The servants were spoiling everyone by doing all of their chores for them. 3 months later, Lee looked like an average girl in her 20s. He stayed in his cozy bed and read books all day. The servants did all of his chores, so he felt like he was turning into a lazy person. He missed having to do stuff by himself. Lee stood up and walked outside searching for Da Yi. As he walked out, he saw Da Yi having a cup of tea with Huo in the garden. As she looked back, she showed Lee her new ring from the western region. Da Yi and Huo looked completely different. This made Lee scream as he realized that their artwork and character design had been completely changed. He felt like he was in a drama meant for middle-aged women. Lee grabbed her by the hand and started running. Da Yi asked him if they were going back to the yard. Lee stopped and told her that his yard wasn't as luxurious as this house, and it didn't have any servants. Moreover, he was sad that no one had fed Blackie in 3 months. Da Yi told him that his yard was the most beautiful place in the world, and that she wanted to go back with him. She said that she could happily live with him in that yard forever. As Lee and Da Yi got a bit too close, Hu jumped in and told Lee that she wanted to go back too. Nun and the dragon girl also joined them and said that they also wanted to go home. Lee smiled and told them that they were going home. As they all started running, Lee grabbed Da Yi by her hand and told her that he had a gift for her. There was the golden gourd seed that had ripened in his yard a few days back. Da Yi looked at him and told him that she also had something to give him. She took out a shiny gem stone and told him that she found it when she went out with Huo. She didn't know what it was, but she hoped that it would help him. Lee accepted the gift and told her that he liked everything that she gave him. As they got a bit too close again, Huo interrupted and told them that the prince was there. Prince Joe apologized for barging in and told Lee that he was there to say goodbye. Lee asked him why he was saying goodbye, since it was his own dynasty. Prince Joe explained that some apostles from the spiritual mountain Buddhist sect were visiting the dynasty, so he was going out to avoid them. Lee asked him about the dynasty, and the prince told him that the power of the sect was expanding rapidly. They wanted to hold a Dharma conference in the Xia dynasty, so they could preach to more people. And they had also invited him to take part in their sect establishment ceremony. The prince told him that he had rejected their request. Lee mentioned that Buddhism didn't contradict the ideas of the Xia dynasty, but if they supported it openly, it might change the nature of the dynasty. The prince revealed that the apostle who came was kind to him, so he couldn't refuse them directly. Lee finally understood why the prince was ignoring the apostle. Before leaving, the prince told Lee that he also knew the apostle. When Lee asked him who they were, the prince told him that her name was Yu Wet Tu.